Hello there and welcome to today's review. Batman is undoubtedly one of the most popular and most beloved superheroes of all time, and he's probably my favorite if I had to choose one. Batman is also a heavy hitter in the comic book, television, and movie departments, but up until the release of Arkham Asylum in 2009, video games didn't really seem to be the preferred medium for a Batman experience. There were, of course, a few Batman games available for the PlayStation 2, and I would like to talk about one of those today, Batman Vengeance. My original plan was to review all 4 of the Batman games that came out for the PS2 in a single video, but considering my recent upload schedule, I realized that the likelihood of that video actually happening was fairly low. So instead, we're just going to talk about one of them today. Before we get into the review though, let me know in the comments what your favorite Batman game is. For me, it has to be either Arkham Asylum or Arkham City. Probably Asylum though, because that's what I have the most fond memories from as a kid. Though I have actually, post-writing this script, been playing through Arkham Knight, which is honestly amazing. And I think that might take the top spot after I'm done. It's hard to say though, because I'm like halfway done with it right now, but that could honestly take the top spot for me. Yeah, I'm interested to see what you guys say though, so go ahead and leave the comment down below before I get into this review, or after, I don't really care, or not at all if you don't really want to. So is Batman Vengeance comparable at all to something like the Arkham series? Well, let's get into some gameplay and find out. Batman Vengeance was released all the way back in 2001 for the Xbox, GameCube, Game Boy Advance, Microsoft Windows, and of course for the PS2. The game was developed and published by Ubisoft and based on the television series The New Batman Adventures, a continuation of the amazing Batman the Animated Series, and a great show in its own right. Vengeance adapts the gorgeous 2D animation style of the show into 3D quite faithfully, and I can honestly say that the visuals were one of my favorite parts of the game. Character models actually resemble their cartoon counterparts, and the backgrounds evoke a sense of nastiness that is quite fitting for Gotham City. Speaking of nasty though, I would be remiss not to mention how muddy things can look at times. The inherently low resolution and the extremely dark color palette are not always kind to each other, which can lead to objects in the background being relatively indistinguishable from one another. Another aspect of the game's presentation that I should definitely mention is the voice cast, which is pretty much the same as the show, with actors Kevin Conroy, Mark Hamill, Tara Strong, and many others reprising their roles. This feels like an authentic continuation of the show. As a big fan of the show myself, this greatly improved the experience for me overall. Story-wise, Vengeance focuses for the most part on the 4 villains that occupy the front cover. The Joker, unsurprisingly, takes center stage with a scheme that quite nicely brings all of these villains together involving his apparent death. To be completely honest, this story doesn't even come close to the animated series in the writing department, but to be fair, not much does. I never felt entirely compelled by what was going on story-wise in Vengeance, and everything just feels kind of formulaic. Like, did anyone think the Joker actually died when he fell into that water? It seems to me like most of the writing choices here were made for the purpose of cool set pieces and bringing Mr. Freeze and Poison Ivy into the game somehow. Also, with the sheer magnitude of villains that Batman has amassed over the years, it's kind of sad that they only featured 4 in this game. I would have loved to see an appearance or just a cameo from someone like Mad Hatter or Clayface, but I guess they did have to save some villains for a sequel. We'll talk about that beauty another time though. I do have to give this game some props though for including Batgirl. If you've happened to see my Nostalgia Time video about Rise of Sin Tzu, you'll know that I'm quite the fan of Batgirl. Oh, look at her dangling the batarang.
I don't want to ever hear you do that again, actually. Stop doing that.
Is that not what she sounds like? The story in Vengeance isn't necessarily bad, it just really isn't anything special, or if you're like me, anything you'll remember. So, do the combat and gameplay save this game from the depths of mediocrity? Wouldn't want to spoil the surprise. Let's talk about it. Let's start out with the combat, with these very respectful goons who, no matter what, will always attack Batman exclusively one at a time. Like seriously, it must be against their religion or code of honor or something to gang up on someone. Remember that part in the show when Batman goes into that warehouse with like 5 guys and then they put down their guns and each challenge him to a one-on-one duel? No? It's bonkers, man. Also, Batman must be lining his gloves with feathers or something, because every single goon will get right back up in like 30 seconds after you take them down, unless you bat cuff them. People think the Christian Bale Batman was badass, or maybe even Michael Keaton. They clearly haven't met this stud. At least we know for certain none of these thugs were seriously injured. I guess that's more than the Arkham games can say. So, disregarding all of that goofiness, how is the actual fighting? Well, if you like enemies that legitimately never stop blocking, then you'll love this shit. You could make the case that this is just really intelligent AI that values its safety, but I'm gonna make the case that it's just really fucking annoying. When you are actually able to hit your enemies, you can punch, kick, or use one of these special moves that plays a little animation when you use them. I think that this meter might have something to do with when you can use them, but I honestly have no idea. The special moves are pretty cool, but other than that, there's no kind of combos or anything like that to make the combat interesting. I did notice that sometimes Batman's hands would turn red when I press certain buttons, but I don't have any idea what that actually does or if you could even call that a combo. It's also pretty impossible to tell when you should be blocking, because the enemies punch you so damn fast that you'll be on your ass before you can even think about pressing X. It just feels like they didn't put much effort into creating a fun combat system, so they settled with this shitty one where you can only fight one guy at a time who never stops blocking, and who can knock you on your ass in a millisecond. If there was any way to sneak up on these guys or take them out some other way, this would be okay, but there's no choice. You have to fight all of these guys in single combat. And don't forget to bat cuff them. There are of course some gadgets that Batman has at his disposal, though you can only really use them from a distance. The main problem here is that you have to be in first person mode to use most gadgets. I'm assuming they were inspired by one of the 3D Zelda games, but it just doesn't work here. Switching between gadgets is cumbersome, though the game does at least pause while you do it. And then when you get into first-person mode, you have to deal with an imprecise aiming system and movement controls that are completely different from what you'll be used to at this point. That said, there were some sections where this system did actually work for me, like this one bit where you're on a train fighting these plant monsters who die after a single electric batarang. In parts like this, you can play the game kind of like a first-person shooter, which actually feels surprisingly alright, even though this is a Batman game, so that sounds kind of weird to say. Outside of sections where you need to use gadgets to beat certain enemies, most of them are pretty much useless, unfortunately. Trust me, I would much prefer hitting all of the goons with some batarangs to utilizing the arduous combat system, but that's not really a choice. Luckily, this game is not all about combat, and gameplay-wise, that has to be its greatest strength. Batman Vengeance has a surprising and welcome amount of variety in its gameplay. I was honestly surprised by just how much there was to do in each level. There's plenty of puzzles, exploration segments, set pieces, vehicle sections, and a lot of other stuff I'm probably forgetting. This game realizes that Batman isn't just an angry guy who punches people really hard, and that is reflected in the number of different activities that you'll participate in game. Of course, not all of these gameplay types are amazing. Like I mentioned before, the combat pretty much blows, and the platforming, well, I'll talk about that in a minute. But my point is that there's enough variety that you won't end up getting too upset with certain sucky sections. For example, I'm sure that the vehicle sections would get boring after a while, but before you know it, you'll be trying not to electrocute yourself in Mr. Freeze's lab and throwing batarangs at plant people. I can't be too positive though for too long, so let's talk about the platforming. Controlling Batman in this game can be quite infuriating, to say the least. And honestly, I think that's more of a PS2 issue than anything else. There were sections I had to redo like 30 times because I would just miss the simplest little movement. Coupling this with instant death pits is a true recipe for disaster. On a positive note though, I actually really like the way gliding with the cape feels. I don't know what it is about it exactly, it was just executed really well. It's also one of the only instances in this game where I actually feel like Batman while playing. So, is Batman Vengeance a worthy opponent of something like the Arkham series? Hell nah. Does Batman Vengeance deserve more recognition as a Batman game that predates the Arkham series? Hell nah. Well, maybe. I clearly had a lot of issues with this game, even some that I neglected to mention. But considering when this game came out, the faithful 3D visuals, and the variety that this game offers, it is certainly interesting to look at today. I found myself getting frustrated with Vengeance pretty often, but I am still glad I played it at the end of the day. For a lot of fans like myself, the inclusion of the voice cast from the show is pretty much enough to make it worth a play on its own, despite how annoying the gameplay can often be. Batman Vengeance is certainly no Arkham game, and it doesn't necessarily even feel like a precursor to one. But it does have its merits, and the variety that it offers is still impressive by today's standards. It impressed me. That's all I've got for Batman Vengeance, but let me know down in the comments if you're down to see a review of the sequel to this game, Rise of Sin Tzu, which I've already done a Nostalgia Time video on the channel with my girlfriend, so you can check that out if you would like to. Like I said before, I was originally planning on doing all 4 of the PS2 Batman games in a single video, but I decided to just do one at a time, so you can expect to see the other ones covered at some point in the future. As always, your feedback is greatly appreciated, so please consider leaving a like if you did enjoy the video, and subscribing if you would like to see more stuff like this. Also, don't forget to let me know in the comments what your favorite Batman game is if you haven't done so already, because I'm interested to see what everyone says. And make sure to be very respectful of everyone's opinions, as I know you will. Thank you so much for watching once again. I'll see you when I see ya. Bye.